So for instance, all those issues that I listed earlier, gun
Oh, that's a
rights,
great point.
abortion,
Yep.
marijuana, there's always been a flip side. There's always someone on the other side that doesn't want to legalize or ban one of those things. The Overton window is always shifting on who's in control, who's in power. For decades, the marijuana industry and people that were pro marijuana were shoved to the darkest corners of the earth, like literal
Yeah.
felony criminal stuff. And
Yeah.
now massive amounts of business is happening all over the world. And particularly in my state, you see tons of money being made, tons of taxes being pulled in. I don't even understand why we
Exactly.
ever banned this stuff in the first place. But you always have this back and forth. Bitcoin is the only single issue in American history that has no opposition voter bloc, but
That's
yet
right.
has 40 to 50 million people who are ready to vote on that single issue. And not only that, but we're going to be one of the wealthiest single issue voter blocks in American history. So it is my position that we will be the strongest single issue voter bloc in US political history, maybe in the history of the world, because there's nobody against us and we're too wealthy, so they can't buy us off.
Welcome to Mission DeFi with Brad Nickel, where we explore projects in decentralized finance that are innovating and driving our mission of financial freedom forward. Thank you for listening. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, rate, and review Mission DeFi and spread the word by posting a tweet to the show. All opinions expressed by Brad Nickel or his guests are their opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Black Knox, Material Indicators, or any other affiliated organizations. You should not treat any opinion expressed by Brad Nickel or his guests as an inducement to make a particular investment, follow a particular strategy, or become involved with any project. A project being featured on the show is not an endorsement of that project in any way. This podcast is for informational purposes only. Now, here's Mission DeFi with Brad Nickel.
I'm excited today to have Dennis Porter on the show because Dennis and I have connected over politics, and we obviously connect over, both of us love Bitcoin. I think Dennis loves Bitcoin, probably a little bit more devoted to it than I am, but we both appreciate what it is and what it does and what it'll do for the world. So we both had connected over a political candidate, somebody running for Congress against somebody we both pretty much despise. So we'll talk about that a bit. But first is have Dennis tell us a little bit of his background, how he ended up in Bitcoin world, and about his podcast and what that's all about. His podcast is called Smart People Shit, and I love it. My kids love having me as a father because there are no words that are out of bounds. So anyway, go ahead, man. Talk to us. Tell us about yourself.
We're the same thing in our house. We say all the words as long as they aren't said explicitly outside the house too much, right?
Exactly.
But yeah, exactly, yeah. So for me, got started Bitcoin. Let's go. We can start with that, I guess. That would be the best place to start. Bitcoin 2017, got turned on to it by a friend of mine who he had very little interest in it, but said there's this anonymous money that people are using on the internet, to do all sorts of interesting things these days. And I'm just thinking to myself, well, that sounds impossible with my understanding of the way the world works. So that piqued my interest quite a bit. I decided to go begin researching. I quickly fell in love, quickly became obsessed with Bitcoin, and also quickly found out that it's not totally anonymous.
Right.
So it's an interesting way to enter in. But 2017, and then I saw the bull run happen. It was a pretty incredible moment. I thought it was to the moon from there. We were never turning back. So I had a really good time watching that up, and then a really hard lesson, watching it come down and watching it stabilize and go into a long-term bear market. During that time, 2018, I got into mining. I started mining out of my basement pretty heavily. So it wasn't just a tiny little operation, but I was running tiny by today's standards, right? But back then it was, I had 20 ASICs running out of my basement. So multi-$1,000 a month power bill. And luckily the lady, she didn't mind the noise. She said it sounded like a nice white noise machine because, man, are those things loud. They are incredibly loud. So,
and yet nobody came knocking on your door for growing pot or anything because of the electrical usage.
You know what? I live in Portland, Oregon, so it's not too big of a problem.
Not a big
here.
deal. That's awesome. Yeah. That's awesome.
They actually came by and inspected what I was doing so that I could get a lower power rate. Because if you're a company, for those of you that don't know, if you're a company or you're running some sort of business out of your home and you're using a lot of electricity, you can request to have, with most utilities, you can request a cheaper power rate. So it was actually half of the
Wow.
current power rate. So that saved me quite a bit of money having them come in. She said, I was like, have you ever seen stuff like this before? She said, oh, I do this all day long. I just constantly go around and inspect people's mining operations. I'm sure it's kind of died down from a home to home sort of situation since 2017, 2018, but everybody kind of thought they could be a miner back then. That was the common theme. We're all going to be miners, and we're all going to mine out of our basements, and I quickly realized that in order to maintain my position and to grow my Bitcoin stack, I was going to have to exponentially grow my mining operation way beyond what my home could even possibly ever hope to facilitate. So I started having the talk with the lady, and that got shot down real fast. So I was like, we got to go all in. Yeah, exactly. We got to go all in on this thing. And she's like, you're losing your damn mind. If you buy one more of those miners, I think the relationship is going to be over. So
wow. Wait, let me ask you a quick question though. Did you have a technical background prior to diving into mining, or was this like seat of the pants, baby, learn it all? Oh,
all
my
YouTube,
God.
all YouTube, all books. Zero. I started doing electrical work because of YouTube. I was doing all sorts of I almost killed myself though, so don't do electrical work yourself.
Yeah, I don't touch the electrical.
Hire a professional. It only took one close call, and I was like, yeah, I'm done with this. I'm not doing this ever again. I'm good paying the overpriced fees it takes to get an electrician into the house. So
yeah, you can learn anything on YouTube, but there's some things that just let's not.
Doctor, lawyer, electrician, those
puffer
sorts of
fish,
things. Yeah,
that kind of stuff.
Puffer fish dissection. Yeah. I don't want to be poisoning myself, killing myself anytime soon. Had a great time. I loved it. It was I think it was a big part of my journey and understanding Bitcoin, but the physical attachment of Bitcoin to the real world. That's what mining does. It actually creates something that links something digital to the actual physical world, and being able to play with that technology and that hardware was a really good time. I still have a bunch of the miners. I might get back into it with a buddy, but I don't know. We'll see. So from there, big bear market comes, just devastating. It's hard to deal with. This is my first rodeo. It gets a little doom and gloom online. It gets a little depressing. So I kind of put it on the back burner for some time. Still learning, still educating myself, still reading, still 100% believing. I never sold any of the Bitcoin that I acquired during that process. But there was no part of me that was ever going to do that. So kept holding on all the way through 2019. My interest starts to pick up again. 2020, COVID happens, and then we're locked inside all day long. And just before this had happened, I kind of had this thought that I wanted to start a podcast. I wanted to start speaking more. I enjoy speaking. I enjoy talking. I enjoy educating people. And so I started that process. But then when COVID happened and Clubhouse happened, it was like all of a sudden everybody was in the same room talking about Bitcoin on these Clubhouse rooms.
Sure.
And my understanding, my knowledge, my speaking abilities just went through the roof. Like just 6 months ago, what's January? What are we, 8 months? 8 months ago, okay, was when I jumped on Clubhouse. I was so nervous. I have natural stage fright. I was so nervous. I was like shaking, sweating.
Wow.
Was not able to talk at all. And it's true. If you just stick to stuff, man, like you just keep going, keep doing it, eventually you completely overcome it. And I still get it a little bit in big moments, but now I just have a great time talking about Bitcoin. So just spent about 500 hours on Clubhouse, kept going, kept pushing, moved over to Twitter Spaces, launched obviously the podcast in that process, Smart People Shit podcast. And then having a ton of great guests on. Great show. Really enjoy it. Going to be expanding, doing a new show here soon, doing like a weekly breakdown of Bitcoin.
Nice.
Got into this. We may talk about this a little bit, but I got into this like Ethereum versus Bitcoin position where I debate it openly with people, and I debated David Hoffman from Bankless on Twitter Spaces. It's recorded if people want to go listen to it.
It is awesome because I really want to hear that.
It's a really good debate. I mean, we make great points. It just kind of comes down to a lot of times what's your preconceived position, like where are you at already? I probably didn't change too many. A lot of times I don't think those debates change too many people's minds. There was some people on the fence though that I will say DM'd me and said, dude, I'm all in on Bitcoin now. So, which is my ultimate goal. I'm really big time Bitcoin believer. So the other thing though, which is part of why I'm here, is the political stuff that I'm into, which actually started before the crypto tax amendment was introduced. Most people got involved politically when that happened. They just jumped up to it, and there were some people involved, like Coin Center. Obviously, they do a lot of were people already out there. But I started to get involved when Brad Sherman started speaking up too much. Brad Sherman, for those of you that don't know, California's 30th congressional district congressman, House, and he is probably one of the most anti-Bitcoin congressmen in office today.
Yeah, he has
So
to be
he wants to
he's
outright
the one.
ban Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's the ultimate target, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So then a group of us started chatting on Telegram, and I thought, I'm gonna put out a little tweet and see what's up. I tweeted at Erica Rhodes and said, "What's your position on Bitcoin?" And she turned around and said that she is against a ban on Bitcoin, that she is in favor of financial literacy, and she believes in protecting this technology. So I was like, great, that's a great place to start.
Right.
One wants to ban Bitcoin, one is against banning Bitcoin. So
let's start there.
Let's start this. So we DM back and forth a bunch. I'm sending her books. I'm sending her articles to read. She's just digesting all of that information, which is rare, extremely rare from candidates. I have a background.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for those that don't know, I have a background in politics. So
that's what's going to be let's hit that real quick, because that's one of the questions I'm holding in my head right now is, how politically active were you prior to starting to get active on crypto?
So I've been politically aware my entire life. My dad had me sitting in the car listening to talk radio. I grew up extremely conservative, so it was very much, Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity as I grew up. But regardless of your position on politics, right? Like having someone constantly talking about it, you're aware of what's going on, and you have an understanding of how important this stuff is. When I left my family, because I grew up extremely religious, I lived in Mexico for 3 years. We were missionaries. So all the gambit. My parents live in El Salvador today, even still are missionaries on the field. So, but very, very conservative, started out extremely far on the right. And when I left the church and I left my family to go out on my own, I had to, swing to the left, had to go see what's up with the other sides, make sure that I'm not making any of the wrong decisions. I was at the time a big supporter of Bernie and what he was doing, just because I felt like nobody was really saying anything to make any differences or make any changes that were necessary. I got to a place where eventually went back and forth, hemmed and hawed, and became very much in the middle when it comes to politics. Mostly because I became dissatisfied with the process. For those of you that think the tribalism between the Republicans and the Democrats is bad, just go to an actual party meeting for one of those teams, right? And they're just as bad on the inside. It's extremely ugly. Tribal. And I was like, I tried both sides, hung out with them, tried to see what's up, and I just was like, I can't do this. This is so insane, and nothing is getting done. Not even the stuff that they want to get done gets done, because there's some faction in the party that's constantly pushing them to go super far left, super far right.
Extreme, yeah.
It was very disappointing. But one thing that I did notice when I was there, first of all, I helped 4 candidates win their primaries through various efforts. I'm 4 out of 4. So I'm hoping that Erica Rhodes will be 5 out of 5 for me here.
Awesome.
So that's what we're shooting for. Let's keep it a perfect record. But one of the things that I really noticed when I was involved politically was the power of single issue voter blocks. There were several single issue voter blocks. Some of you might know of them today. There's the pro and anti-marijuana, you have pro anti-abortion, you have pro and anti-gun rights. You have pretty much a plethora of issues to choose from. But these groups, tend to be very powerful, especially the ones that are in the position of power, the power seat. For instance, you could say the gun right lobby, the gun rights activists. Despite being I wouldn't say they're a huge group, they're a very powerful group.
Very.
And so that's why you see legislation and power being shifted, is because of these small groups that go really deep on a single issue. And I used to think to myself, how could you possibly be obsessed with one issue? I don't get it. It's so unfair too, because they're able to just totally manipulate the political system with just this one. I don't know if I call manipulate. I mean, that's a strong word, but they really are able to get what they want done because they're so hyper focused. Instead of what's that comparison? Instead of going wide, go deep. That's exactly what they do.
Yeah.
And it ends up where they a lot of times get what they want done. Well, lo and behold, after all these years, I find myself
deep on a single
transcending
issue.
to the single issue voter blocks. I am a single issue voter, Bitcoin voter, and I will do everything I can to make sure that the United States is the best place to buy, sell, earn Bitcoin, to live as a Bitcoiner. I want America to be just like El Salvador. it's the wildest part is there's so many people that think that what I'm trying to do is crazy. We've done it multiple times in the United States.
Hell yeah.
We've done it with the separation of the church and state. When we left Britain, we did it with taxation without representation. When we decided to throw the T in the harbor, and I think that we can do it again with separation of money and state with Bitcoin.
That's fascinating. I love your background too. I think that's really interesting to see the swings in your life. I mean, from the far right as a kid to the far left with Bernie, back to the right probably, and then somewhere in the middle. And I've reached a point in my life where I've ended up in the middle, but I think I was pretty much in the middle most of my life. I've always been a Democrat, always been on the left. When I was younger, early 20s, more extreme, left side of things. But I started my political career out, or my political involvement out, managing my professional career, managing political campaigns. So I did that for 8 years. My first campaign was, I was in college, and a buddy of mine who worked in politics said, "Hey, there's this guy, he's running," it was in New Jersey, "he's running for state assembly, has no chance, has no money, but it'll be fun for you. You love politics. You should go do this." My parents always had me active when I was a kid, like yours. And so I did, and we won. And I had no clue what I was doing except get him knocking on thousands of doors, and we hit his 2 incumbent opponents in the last 2 weeks with masses of negative advertising. So we were the typical political operation, right? Well, all of a sudden, people at the National Democratic Party and the state party were calling me that night, asking me when I could fly out to the next place they wanted me to work. And I was saying, I don't even know what the hell I'm doing. I mean, I have some gut instinct about politics, but you people are nuts. So I spent the next 8 years flying around doing campaigns all over the country, and it was a complete blast. I had so much fun doing it. And I learned so many good business skills. I learned managing hundreds of people and managing egos and marketing and sales and the whole bit. Anyway, the whole point of that is that I burned out after 8 years, and I wasn't heavily involved in politics for a while. And only in the last few years have I started to get engaged more. I've always paid attention and chose who I was voting for, but get engaged more. The regulation of crypto or Bitcoin has been an incredible concern of mine, right? I think we have incredible weaknesses on on-ramps and off-ramps. I think we have to get people engaged in buying and in interacting, and I'll use the word Bitcoin instead of crypto for this interview. And I think that this becomes, for me, the first time in my life where I actually might make voting decisions on a single issue because I know the impact of Bitcoin on all the other issues, right? I understand that if we don't do this, then I'm probably not going to be able to solve everything else I'd like to see solved. So I think we have a similar kind of path to where we ended up both kind of saying, got to make this happen, right? We've got to solve this. So Erica Rhodes, you and I both had a connect. You reached out to her because she's running against enemy number one in the United States against crypto. I actually had somewhat of a relationship with her because she and I were both supporters of Andrew Yang. I supported Andrew Yang because right wing and left wing were coming together to back a candidate, which was to me incredible. And I liked a lot of his logical policy positions. But Erica was like a powerhouse machine on that campaign. Like her personality was out there. She was doing videos all day. She traveled the whole country. So I knew she was going to work her butt off. And when she announced she was running against Brad, I was like, oh, please give me the link to send money because I know you're going to do this. So, and I already knew she was pro crypto, so Bitcoin. So
I appreciate it.
I think that this though, brings up something really important. We have all these people who are now motivated, who realize how close we can get to losing what we have, and we need more, right? We're just trying to protect what we have, much less have some clarity on what we can do. And so I'm glad people are moved and took action and scared the hell out of the politicians. The question becomes, I think this is a lot of what you're doing, is how do we make sure that we keep this army marching forward, and how do we keep them energized? And that's always a problem in politics, right? It's until there's a danger, an imminent danger, that humans don't really get motivated. What are your thoughts on what we can do going forward for this?
You're absolutely right when you talk about politics in that fashion. A lot of people, I think, in the Bitcoin, greater crypto space, they didn't want to get involved politically. The problem with politics, though, is if you ignore politics, it eventually will come for you, and it'll take advantage of the fact that you haven't done enough to prepare for moments like the crypto tax amendment. lot of us realized, I was getting involved with Erica, but I think a lot of us really realized very quickly that it's very dangerous to just sit around and wait for something to happen. Because if that's your position, if your position is to be constantly on defense, inevitably you're going to be losing more than you're winning. And so it's our goal and my goal and a lot of other Bitcoiners out there that I'm working closely with. And I'll say Bitcoiners because we do have our own movement that's occurring. We very much want to have the ability to apply pressure from a purely pro Bitcoin stance. Fortunately for the entire crypto space, that generally benefits everybody because we are essentially the shield of the entire industry. If Bitcoin didn't exist, which is the most decentralized system that is out there today, by far, some would argue it is the only truly decentralized. That's obviously a very fierce debate amongst people that are in the space.
Mission DeFi is sponsored by Material Indicators. Material Indicators brings science to investing and helps investors make more informed and smarter trading decisions. Their powerful community of thousands of experienced investors is free to join and is available to anyone that wants to learn more about trading crypto successfully. Visit their website at materialindicators.com. That's materialindicators.com. Or join their community on Telegram by searching for Material Indicators.
But if Bitcoin goes down, there will be nothing to protect the rest of the industry. And that's why it's so important that we do have our own group, that we're constantly pushing and fighting for this stuff. And there is a very massive groundswell of people that are getting together, having the conversations, doing the work. And there's going to be a big, large wave of new people coming to the space that you'll see here soon. Some of them are already here, some of them are on their way. And we are fighting as hard as we can to make sure that we drive home this point that we need to be more on the offensive. I actually used to believe that it was fine for us to be on the defensive, but the way that this crypto tax amendment process occurred really changed my mind, and as well as the conversations that I've had with a bunch of other very, very intelligent, very smart Bitcoiners, some of them extremely politically active, much more politically active than myself, much more ingrained in what's going on in DC. So I think it's important that we do stand up and we do make our voices heard. Otherwise, we're going to be stuck in a situation where we're constantly losing and constantly trying to change. We don't want to be in a position where we're changing one or two words. That's what we were fighting over. One or two words change, right? And we couldn't even get that. We want to be in the position where we're writing the legislation. This is, not literally writing it and handing it to them, although that I'll be fine with that.
That's how it's done.
I'd rather Bitcoiners write it than the lobbyists for the other side, right?
Right.
Than the Treasury, for instance, in this situation. So we are trying to get ourselves in a position to do a few things. One of them is to ensure that we have great educational information out there and that we're able to deliver high quality information to candidates, to politicians currently in office, and also to have experts that we can go to and we can tap on the shoulder and say, hey, we want you to go on TV. Hey, we need you to go talk on this panel and explain what's going on. And then we are forming all sorts of groups, PACs, super PACs, you name it, every kind of 501, whatever you want to call it, right? C3, C4, 527s are forming and getting ready to go out and do battle. And this is really important because this is the system, this is the infrastructure that the extremely powerful, the extremely wealthy built in order to give themselves a moat, right? You go back to Citizens United and the unlimited amount of money that can be spent in these elections. And you quickly can see why they've been able to give themselves so much power, because they can dump as much money as they want into wherever they want, and they can do it without even having their name on the donation itself. So we plan to use the same system that was used to corrupt government against those that are corrupting government. If that
use the weapons they didn't expect to be able to. They never envisioned a lobby with the funds that this one has, right?
This is exactly it.
That's where they never imagined that a smaller group of folks on one issue could marshal the financial resources to take them out. And now we have it, and they've given us the tools to do it. And that to me puts us in a great position.
This is a really great point, Brad. So when I talk about us as a single issue voter block, and we can talk about the whole group, I get the sense that 90% of the time we'll agree. We
Yep.
might not always agree, but
Yep.
for the now, we agree, and we all benefit from the work that's being done currently in this space. We'll have our own lobbies, we'll have our own groups. When we need to fight, we'll fight, right? But
Yep.
that's not where we're at right now. Fortunately for, I think, everybody else, the Bitcoiners. I'm not Bitcoiners always win kind of guys, but
Yeah.
but
Well, look, and I
right now we're
completely
working
agree
together.
with
But
you that no
but
Bitcoin, no
I'll say
anything.
though, the single issue voter thing is really important because for the first time, you have a voter block that has no opposition. So, for instance, all those issues that I listed earlier, gun
Oh, that's a
rights,
great point.
abortion,
Yep.
marijuana, there's always been a flip side. There's always someone on the other side that doesn't want to legalize or ban one of those things. The Overton window is always shifting on who's in control, who's in power. For decades, the marijuana industry and people that were pro marijuana were shoved to the darkest corners of the earth, like literal
Yeah.
felony criminal stuff. And
Yeah.
now massive amounts of business is happening all over the world. And particularly in my state, you see tons of money being made, tons of taxes being pulled in. I don't even understand why we ever banned this stuff in the first place. But you always have this back and forth. Bitcoin is the only single issue in American history that has no opposition voter block, but yet has 40 to 50 million people who are ready to vote on that single issue. And not only that, but we're going to be one of the wealthiest single issue voter blocks in American history. So it is my position that we will be the strongest single issue voter block in US political history, maybe in the history of the world, because there's nobody against us and we're too wealthy, so they can't buy us off.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think it will be. And I think it is the most powerful ever, potentially. I think we have some inherent cultural issues in Bitcoin and across really all of crypto. There's a segment of the population that believes engaging in any way in politics is a waste of time, or worse, a ticket to hell. And so the question becomes, do you think you're far more engaged with the lowest levels of the involvement of the Bitcoin community? Do you feel like that is turning for people, that they're starting to wake up and say, oh, holy crap, yeah, I'd really like to not engage in politics, but guess what? Politics is going to engage with me. So do you see some of that sentiment changing, or do you think that's really a minority segment and it doesn't matter because so many of the smart Bitcoiners are going to engage with it?
You make a very good point here, Brad, that it historically has been very dangerous to approach politics, to push for a political agenda. I've even been one of those people who resists the idea of getting involved. When it comes down to it, you can't stop Bitcoin. You can't truly ban it. There's nothing you can do. But what you can do as a country is you can either decide to be a part of the future, or you can decide to live in the past. And a lot of us rose up and decided that we want to live in the future, and we don't want to have to move outside this country to do it.
Yep.
So we're fighting to make sure that the United States is the best place to buy, sell, trade, and earn Bitcoin, because we want to have the infrastructure here. We want to have the companies here, just like how we had the tech industry built here in the United States. The only reason the United States has not collapsed is really because of the fact that we built the tech industry from scratch and kept it here in our country. It's one of the main reasons why we have so much power today. I think this can happen again. We can see something like this occur in the United States with Bitcoin. We can have the infrastructure here. We can have the miners here. Look at, they all just left China. This is a huge opportunity, not only for money and for growth and for production and for innovation, but it's a national security issue at this point. Because if you don't have any hashing power, you're putting yourself at a serious disadvantage to other countries who might not like you so much. And I know that there's a lot of Bitcoiners out there who say, well, none of these things are going to exist. None of these, maybe in 100 years, maybe 50 years, but we still live in this world that we have today. And although we're transitioning, I think that a lot of the power is going to be taken away from the state when you take away their ability to print unlimited money and to fight unlimited wars. But at the same time, we still live in this world over here. We're transitioning to this world over here. And I want to make sure that when we transition, that America is not burnt to the ground. I want to be living in a country that is full of hope, full of a future potential, not having to flee. If I have to, I can flee, right, with my Bitcoin. Right. That's the whole point of it. That's the whole point, is that you can do it. Do I want to? No. The calculation came down to, I wanted to move. I was pushing to move to either a better state or better country with my family. And it just came down to the realization that that wasn't going to be possible mostly because my girlfriend was like, "You're crazy again," right? Last thing with the miners. So, but we have physical businesses here. We own a home.
Sure.
My mother-in-law lives below me. There is all sorts of things. My son, my stepson, he's in school, right?
Yeah.
We don't want to rip him out. I've been ripped out of my home multiple times, moving to the mission field and back. And I have to say, I agree. It's not necessarily the best move if you can avoid it. So I decided if I can't move, well, I'm going to fight. I'm going to change things. And not only am I going to fight on the national level, but I'm also going to be fighting here in Portland, Oregon as well to make sure that we can change some stuff. So I'm going to be working locally. So if you live in this area, try to connect with me. I'm doing a bunch of stuff to make sure that not only the United States is the best place to buy, sell, trade, and earn, but also that Portland, Oregon can be, like the next Miami, for instance. Nice. So I'm really excited about all the things I'm doing. Obviously, you can tell, I think we have a lot of potential here. People should go read Alex Gladstein's article talking about how we can have a monetary declaration of independence in this country. And I firmly believe that that is a possibility moving forward.
No, I completely agree with you. And it's funny because very similar conversations have been happening in the Nickel household in Miami, of all places. So it's really interesting because I was ready. I was pre-COVID. I was ready. We're out of here. I'm tired of the restrictions on my career, my life, my profession, and I want to go. And we didn't. And now we're working to make it better. So I like that. I think there's a couple of things from a messaging perspective that are important for people to start thinking about, right? I think one of those messages is something you almost kind of touched on when you talked about China kicking out mining and essentially trying to ban crypto. And that is that, Americans love an enemy, and and politicians love an enemy. And they love using the identity of an enemy to create and galvanize Americans behind something. And I think that there are wonderful people in China, and I'm not trying to start a war here, but sure. I think what's going to happen with Taiwan soon, I believe. And I think with the way Bitcoin can be positioned and the way finances can be positioned as a weapon against China could be an opportunity for us as we lobby to motivate politicians and voters to take action. I think another thing that's important for us to understand is that Erica Rhodes is a Democrat and a pretty liberal Democrat, right? And interestingly enough, has been, as I've talked about her online on Twitter, the number of Bitcoiners or people involved in the space who I know are incredibly conservative, who are smart enough to say, it doesn't matter because this is going to be a Democrat in this seat no matter what. So you better make sure the ones we put in the Republican seats and in the Democratic seats are ones that are pro Bitcoin, pro crypto, right? And so I think it's important that we try to get that messaging across to people. And I think that has to be part of what we do going forward. And I absolutely agree with you that we have to drive the agenda. You put it so beautifully, this fact that there's never been a power like our power. And we have this incredible opportunity to actually rewrite everything about money. I mean, we really have an opportunity right now to do it. New poll came out the other day. I think it was we're up to like 51% of people have bought or engaged with cryptocurrencies in some way.
Yeah.
That's an amazing number. And nobody feels like they got hurt by it unless, 2017, there's probably a few, but 2018, there's a few.
Well, let's let no one sell, and we'll make sure we never go into another bear market.
Exactly. So I think that's great. If you were going to ask the audience to take an action, what would you ask them to do? Like, this week that they can do to start getting involved in doing something?
There is a lot going on right now under the ground, under the radar, but there is going to be some incredible opportunities for people to get involved. We already are starting the process of making sure people can get involved, because right now we have very prominent, I would say, very active people who this is their life now. Like they've gone all in on politics. Multiple friends of mine have decided that this is where their hill they're going to die on, the USA pro Bitcoin politics. And I think it's an incredible, I'm not even there, right? I'm still doing a lot of other work that isn't necessarily politically associated. So I am not the only person. There are some amazing people doing some incredible stuff, and it's just starting out, but we are creating avenues for people to make sure that they can be in contact with the work that's going on. So if you are interested in getting involved, if you do want to be someone who is having the opportunities to volunteer, being engaged, defending Bitcoin in the United States, I'm going to give you the link and you can share it. There's a Telegram that we have
Perfect.
where everyone can be aware of what's going on. There's a couple of things coming up. One of them is this bipartisan Bitcoin room that I'm doing on the 17th with Natalie Burnell. And
Nice.
we are going to be having a ton of different speakers there to come talk about what we need to do and what others can do, and just create this dialogue so that we can begin the process of building the foundation for where we all want to go collectively, or, decentralized as at the same time. I hate to use the word collectively, but we should get behind certain messages, right? Should is another word that I shouldn't use either too, but if we can get behind a common message, I think it would help us a lot politically to be able to make sure the United States is a pro Bitcoin country. The speakers for that room are going to be, I just listed them. I just posted it out earlier today. So we're going to have Caitlin Long, Alex Gladstein, Jeff Booth, Preston Pish, Bradley Rettler, Ron Hammond from the Blockchain Association. And then we're also going to be having a ton of different candidates stop by to discuss and talk about where their position is. And, that'll include Erica Rhodes and a couple of other politicians that are currently running. I think Matthew Deemer is going to be there as well. He's an Ohio candidate. And it's going to be both sides, right? That's why we called it bipartisan Bitcoin, right? So we're going to have people from both sides there discussing. We'll also hopefully have a few more people getting involved. Tristine, she's working with Riot Blockchain to make sure, which is a mining company, to make sure that they're protected. You've got David Zell, who's another incredibly young, amazing Bitcoiner who's going to be ensuring that we are able to all work together as a group. There's many groups. We all need to work together as a group.
Yep.
There's a ton of people coming together. So if you want to listen into that, that's on the 17th at noon Pacific time, 3 p.m. Eastern time on Twitter Spaces. So if you follow me, you'll be able to pretty quickly be able to see it when it pops up. There'll be reminders going out constantly. But there's a couple of things, though, that you touched on, and I'd like to go over them really quickly. But yeah, there's a big issue here that's happening right now, and with Taiwan, and it's a little worrisome where we're headed with that. The potential of China deciding to move in on Taiwan, and in general, China is becoming increasingly aggressive politically, and I do believe there will eventually be a push to take Taiwan. They've more or less said as much, so that they plan to do their one China policy again and unite everything. They've already done some terrible things in Hong Kong so far.
Yep.
And that's why it's so important that we position ourselves with Bitcoin, because the US dollar can only last for so long as the global reserve currency. Whether it's next year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, every global reserve currency inevitably falls apart, and becomes washed aside by something better or something that has more power behind it. And if that happens with China, we will be put into a serious disadvantage with them geopolitically. And that's why I am such a big proponent of Bitcoin, because we could actually stop this process from occurring. We might not be the reserve currency anymore, but we better damn sure make sure China isn't either, and position Bitcoin to be there instead. So it's a really, really great point that you brought up that I wanted to circle back to as far as making sure that we position ourselves for national security purposes. You say national security purposes, and congressmen's ears perk up. So make sure you mention that when you do go talk to them.
Nice.
If you are wanting to be active, go to your local congressman, go to your local congresswoman, speak to them, tell them, I have a business that depends on Bitcoin. I'm a miner that depends on Bitcoin. I want the infrastructure to stay here, but also make sure you say for national security purposes, because there are some members of Congress that is their key number one focus at any given time. So you can really win some people over with those comments.
That's a great point. I'm going to say something here that'll probably annoy some folks, but when you go to talk to your congressperson, if you want them to take you seriously, if you spend a lot of time, well, there are a few that you can spend a lot of time ranting about the Fed too. But if you spend a lot of time talking about dissolving the Fed and the state is evil and the boot of the neck of the state, I get it. I understand where you're coming from with all of that. I sympathize to a great degree to a lot of that, but it's not going to get you taken seriously in your representative's office. So if you're talking to your representative, it sound like a condescending ass, but if you're talking to your representative, it's really critical to push their buttons, right? It's just like they push our buttons on these single issues, abortion, marijuana, violence in the streets, crime, whatever it is. you've got to push their buttons. What are the things that scare them the most? Well, the number one thing that scares them the most is somebody having more money than them and running against them for office. So that's one of the things we should talk about a little bit in a minute. The other thing is that a hot button issue, like you said, national security, or a hot button issue like jobs, or those kinds of things, that they are somehow going to be perceived as standing in the way of it. So it's really a matter of thinking through how you persuade people to understand the value of Bitcoin and why it should be important to them and their voting constituents, right? And the messaging that we're going to get across. So I think there's two things here. I think there's the carrot, and then I think there's the stick, right? And frankly, what I would love to see right now, and I have a bias because I love Erica Rhodes, but what I would like to see right now, I'd like to see $20 million in her campaign account. That is what I would like to see, because that will scare the shit out of every member of Congress in the country. It will terrify them that this group of people could put $20 million in an unknown candidate's primary bid against probably the most powerful banking congressman in the country. That message alone will open the doors to the conversations of persuasion about how important Bitcoin is, right? And that's, to me, those kinds of actions are the things that actually get us in the door and allow us to make the persuasion.
Money's a big part of it. We talked about this earlier. If you are able to raise the type of money that they raise, it puts you in an incredible position. Money isn't everything, but it is a big piece of the system and how people get elected. And I do agree that it's important that people do donate. I know a lot of people are kind of turned off to the idea of getting politically active these days because of all of the stuff that's been going on, all the crazy world that we've been living in. But there is a hopeful and bright future in front of us. And we need to make sure that we do not give up on that, because ultimately they do want you to give up. They do want you to disconnect. They don't want you to be active. That's really the intent of a lot of people out there, these big players. As far as Erica Rhodes is concerned, as you said earlier, it's going to be a Democrat either way. So if you're a Republican and you're saying, I don't want to support a Democrat, do you want a Democrat that's pro-Bitcoin, or do you want a Democrat that's anti-Bitcoin? Do you want a Democrat that's going to ban the ability to mine and run a node, or do you want one that's going to support you and to build a pro-Bitcoin caucus, someone that's going to unite people across the aisle? Because that's what Erica Rhodes plans on doing. And so I think it's crucial that we get behind her as a candidate. I have been speaking to her very regularly. She's an incredible person. She fights hard, and she does not back down on what she truly believes in. She's not the typical kind of candidate that runs for office and is willing to say whatever she has to say to get elected, because there's been multiple times where I try to get her to say something and she will not do it until she decides that it's the right thing for her to do. And that's why I felt confident and comfortable working with her, because even though we didn't agree on literally everything, which is impossible nowadays, we agree on a lot. And I am willing to fight for someone that's willing to fight for me, and someone that will stand up to the big money interests in Washington. So I think it's important that we do get behind her. And if we aren't able to get these candidates in office, I think what's going to end up happening is you're going to see the potential for Bitcoiners to run, and you're going to see real big amounts of money get behind these people. So this is just the beginning, and we have 10, 20, 30 years down the road to go to completely reshape politics in the United States.
Yeah, and I think we have an opportunity to grab it now. And so I definitely love seeing everything. On the PAC side, are there some specific Bitcoin-oriented PACs? I've been engaged with HODL PAC for quite a while, actually a couple of years, I should say, when they were doing some stuff with Andrew Yang. Are there some folks that people should be looking at? Are they already formed? Are they getting formed? Where does that stand?
We already have some that have filed and that have received their designation. So there will be a lot more news coming out about those organizations, and they will be planning to place money in the important races this coming election. There will be very large amounts of money being placed in specific elections. And I really look forward to sharing more of that information as time goes on.
Cool. And I think it's something else that's important for people to understand is that a large amount of the money that will be spent supporting primary candidates in this campaign will not be on commercials promoting Bitcoin, for the most part, I would assume. They will be on commercials attacking an incumbent's position on issues that voters in that district are concerned about. in order to
Absolutely.
get our pro Bitcoin candidates elected. So that's something else that's important. I think there'll be opportunities for promotion and building a groundswell and grassroots support for Bitcoin. And that's an important component of what we're all trying to do. But it's important for people to know that your money maybe gets spent on some other message that will actually take out an incumbent that's anti-Bitcoin, as opposed to a pro-Bitcoin message trying to get voters to vote on Bitcoin. So
Yeah, it's a big goal of the group to win, not to promote Bitcoin. That's not the goal of any of this stuff. And just so people really are aware of what's happening, this isn't just random people too. Although there is plenty of Bitcoiners that have no political background that are getting involved. I'm got a moderate amount of political understanding and background, but there are people that are absolute experts that are getting involved. There is some people that have been doing this their whole life. There is people that have been making shit happen all day long. And those are the type of people who are Bitcoiners, and they just woke up one day and they went, yeah, I'm going to start fighting for this.
Mission DeFi is sponsored by Material Indicators. Material Indicators brings science to investing and helps investors make more informed and smarter trading decisions. Their powerful community of thousands of experienced investors is free to join and is available to anyone that wants to learn more about trading crypto successfully. Visit their website at materialindicators.com. That's materialindicators.com, or join their community on Telegram by searching for Material Indicators.
Now, this is my life's purpose. Like I've been waiting for this my entire life, and they're not only doing it from a perspective that they're defending their own position, but they're extremely passionate about making sure that we protect Bitcoin in the United States. So I am just a lowly, Bitcoiner doing what I can. Incredible amounts of stuff that'll be coming out, and I look forward to really being able to talk more about it and share as we go. The biggest mistake that they made in Congress was trying to do this so way far away from the election. If they would have done it 6 months to the election, I think they could have gotten it through. And it would have been really difficult for us to build a consensus and support to attack and to take down some of these candidates that will vote for this thing. But now we have so much time. We still have what, like 9 months, 10 months to the primary?
Yep.
And that most of the time, anytime I've gotten involved in politics, I've never gotten involved this early. I've been involved already for 3-4 months, and so have other people. So we have everything on our side moving forward, and I can't be more excited to keep moving forward and doing this work and making it happen.
That's awesome. I appreciate all that you're putting into that. That's fantastic. All right, let's talk a little bit about Bitcoin, Ethereum, and sound money.
That's a great conversation.
I know that pretty well known for being the debater. You and David Hoffman had a debate the other night on Twitter Spaces, correct? And I didn't get to hear it, so I'm excited to know that it was recorded. I am actually, I label myself an anti-maximalist. So my point of view is that every competitor is an opportunity for innovation, and every competitor pushes the incumbents to do better and move faster. Now, move faster isn't something that's necessarily seen by Bitcoin, but there are some actually cool projects around Bitcoin that I'm really excited about. But first, let's talk a little bit about kind of your point of view. I mean, did you start off purely Bitcoin from the beginning?
I was pure Bitcoin from the beginning, and I'm pure Bitcoin today.
And you've never owned like any Ethereum or any altcoin or shit?
I would say I traded coins to try to get more Bitcoin.
Okay.
Of course, I think that pretty much everybody that gets into this space has tried to do that. It seems like an easy way to make more Bitcoin, but there just came a time and place where, first of all, it takes a lot of energy and thought and process to trade. Most people don't realize that 95% of traders lose money, and it just became this constant battle to try to make sure that I'm always ahead of the next curve. And there were times when I was winning and there were times when I was losing, but the times when I was losing just weren't worth it. And it was such a mental drag on me. Even trading stocks, I've done that, right? Like there would be times when I'd be trading, just smashing it, right? And then in like a span of like 3 or 4 days, I would lose the majority of that position. And it just, for me, I have a little bit too much of a gambler's mentality. So I was like, I got to stop doing this. I can't do it anymore. And I haven't been trading for some time now. I don't think it's healthy for me personally. And it's also economically very difficult to be one of those 5% of people that do trade. But I've never saw another project and gone like, oh yeah, like that's the next Bitcoin. That's going to be what really takes over. So if I think that's the core, the crux of the question.
Yeah, that's the crux of the question.
I've always been predominantly someone who is just solely focused on Bitcoin. I've thought that there's interesting things happening on other projects before, and the longer I study Bitcoin and the further we get down this path, the less I care about what's happening on the other protocols. That's not to be said that they're not doing interesting things. I think that some of the work that's being done will inevitably show itself to be useful and part of the future. I personally believe everything will eventually be built in a layer on top of Bitcoin, very similar to how the internet has built. The internet's built in layers. There's multiple layers built on top of each other. That's how protocol stacks work. That's how network effects work. But I don't think that that's going to be any different when you go over to the crypto side. I think that everything is going to be built on top of Bitcoin. I think you're going to have all the smart contracts. You're going to have all the dApps. You're going to have all of the NFTs, if that ends up being something that is useful, right? I don't know. It's kind of a craze right now more than it is showing its true utility. But I truly believe that the most important innovation that we created is the ability to have sound money that can't be debased, can't be manipulated by governments. For 10,000 years, we've been using money as a technology. And for 10,000 years, people in power have been debasing and corrupting that money. And it has led to some of the worst and most atrocious events in history. The three that I like to highlight are going the furthest back in time is, if you look at Rome, for instance. Rome was a very powerful, obviously, empire that grew expansively. But eventually what they started to do is they started to debase their currency, and you could actually time the decline of Rome to the decline of the denarii. They started off, I think it was with roughly 4 grams of silver in each coin, and it ended up with like less than 0.05. So it's a huge debasement. Eventually the soldiers wouldn't even fight for the wages anymore. And so they're just like, I'm done. I'm not going to risk my life. So that led part and part to the collapse of Rome. Then you move on forward and you get the transatlantic slave trade. What ended up happening there is the West African nations were using this currency that they had decided to choose and use, which is a glass agri-bead. And glass making abilities were pretty primitive in Africa at that time, despite the fact that they were pretty wealthy and had discovered a lot of other innovations, but they were unable to hold on to all of that because the Europeans came south to trade with them, and they did have glass making abilities, advanced glass making abilities, and were able to dramatically debase, more or less pillage these West African nations, and led to it just untold amounts of capital and human life being stripped out of those countries. And we can see today that Africa has really never recovered from that.
Sure.
The absolute theft, just theft of time and energy and capital and human life, which is disgusting, right? So because of that, West Africa has never really recovered. I would say Africa as a continent has suffered greatly ever since then because of the ability to debase money, right? And then you look at a couple of recent events, but more in particular is what happened with the Weimar Germany, where they hyperinflated their currency to nothing. It was worthless, right? And that led to the rise of Nazism and Hitler, which led to World War III and tens of millions of people being killed. So we've seen throughout history that human beings cannot resist the temptation to debase and manipulate. And there's countless stories of this happening throughout history where we will destroy our own civilizations because we can't resist the temptation to use the money printer to our benefit when we're in the position of power. Bitcoin is the first money in 10,000 years that can't be debased, can't be manipulated, can't be controlled, totally decentralized. Nobody's able to print more. And that is an incredible thing because it will stop us from manipulating the money in a way that actually leads to the collapse of society. So by being pro Bitcoin, you're pro society. You're pro like humans. Like it's one of the most moral causes you could possibly be a part of, right? So I'm a big believer in Bitcoin for that reason. I will keep fighting for Bitcoin every day. I'm not saying that other stuff won't happen that could have a use case, but this is where I start to really take offense. I didn't have a huge problem with people over in the Ethereum camp until they started to say they're ultrasound money. And that to me is why I started to really speak up about Ethereum and what's going on over there, because I have a sense of like economic justice. So I really don't like when people lie or scam, but particularly when you try to insinuate that your Ethereum, your ETH, is more sound than Bitcoin. And this is an argument that you can quickly pick apart, because being deflationary, which is the argument that they make, is what creates sound money principles in Ethereum. Unfortunately, that's not how sound money is defined. Sound money is money that cannot be manipulated and money that cannot go up and down in cost or purchasing power rapidly, right? So in order to achieve that position, you have to look at which one is better positioned to become sound money. And to me, I don't think that Ethereum fits that bill, because just like the dollar, even if you were to make the dollar deflationary today, it wouldn't be sound money all of a sudden. Just same with Ethereum. They make it deflationary. That doesn't make it sound money all of a sudden, because you can still tinker with it. You can still mess with it. And I think that was the ultimate point that I made in the debate. I think David scored some points. He made some great, he brought up some good information, but that to me is the big thing. Like, Ethereum is not sound money. Advertising it as sound money is a lie. And I think it's important that people know that the innovation here is the ability for humans to control money or not control money. And with Ethereum, you can watch their monetary policy, you can watch their issuance rate change constantly. And that's because it's human intervention, and they're able to change that policy multiple times. If you look at Ethereum, or if you look at Bitcoin, it's purely programmatic, zero human intervention. It's this having, because we're on an issuance schedule and not on a like set inflation rate. So, I mean, I could dive much deeper into it, but
oh, that's great. That's awesome.
I could dive much deeper into it, but that's the kind of the crux of the position for why I'm opposed to Ethereum from that stance of the sound money argument.
Well, I will tell you, the time I heard someone use the term ultrasound money in regards to Ethereum, I tweeted immediately a list of reasons it's not. And inclusive in that was some of what you talked about. Also inclusive in that was a number of other things that I think are still broken there, right? But now, do I think that it can't become that someday? Potentially. Do I think it serves a purpose current in where I would like financial freedom to go? Yes. And I think it currently does that better in some regards than other things. On the other side of that, what turns me off a lot on the Bitcoin side, and the attacks turn me off on the Ethereum side just as much. So I want to make sure I clarify that, is the immediate use of the word scam about everything anybody's doing in the Ethereum space or in any other alternative blockchain space. And for me, I know people that work in these projects, and I know that they're not attempting to pull off a scam. Now, I understand the justification of the term scam. I've had these discussions with Bitcoiners about why they use the term scam, that because at the root, it's a scam and then everything is a scam off of it, right? I get it. But I don't think that gets us anywhere as a society. I like a reasoned debate. And I will tell you that the guys on Bankless drive me nuts, because half the time I'll turn on their podcast to learn more about a project, and instead I get this maximalist positioning questions of, even when they had, like the other day they had Solana on, right? They had some guys on that's like Solana on, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the title of the episode was Learn Everything You Ever Wanted to Know About Solana. And I turned off the episode 30 minutes in, because the entire episode was these guys playing Ethereum maximalists trying to tear down Solana through the questions they were asking, instead of just teaching me about what this thing is and let me decide. So, and I'm rambling, but my point being that I think that there is value in multiple players in a world of cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin and Ethereum, the ecosystem. And I also think that there are innovations that will occur that maximalism can actually stifle. And I think they are innovations that can occur on Bitcoin, right? I interviewed Yago from Sovereign the other day, and I was blown away. Bitcoin has a marketing problem, right? In terms of Bitcoin has an amazing brand, but all this other stuff's going on around Bitcoin and nobody knows about it, right? I was completely blown away by what's happening on Sovereign. I can't wait to talk to Manib at Stacks too. You just spoke to him, because I think there's some amazing stuff on there. But there are people in the Bitcoin community who don't think Sovereign or Stacks are pure enough for Bitcoin. And they don't think that there should be any layers on Bitcoin. And I don't think that's your point of view, but I'm just curious what you think about those projects and your position on that kind of stuff. Because it sounds like you like the idea of enabling smart contracts and other technologies on top of Bitcoin.
So I hold the position that I don't want to do any of that stuff on the base layer, because I think the base layer needs to be focused on securing sound money.
Sure.
But if there could be a project that could come along that would enable smart contracts and dApps or decentralized web, we already see that this has happened with Lightning Network. Now you can do instant and free transactions. So all of the other cryptos out there that claim to be, which is not most of the ones that are even promoted anymore these days. But we're talking about, I would say, more like Bitcoin Cash, Litecoin, these types of other projects where they're seen as almost like a cheaper way to use crypto from a transaction standpoint. But we've seen now that Bitcoin has been able to overcome this with the Lightning Network. You can literally do free instant transactions on Bitcoin. So we solved that problem. It took us time, but the engineering was built and we were able to accomplish it. I think, in my opinion, that you will see more engineering occur, and you'll see more layer ones maybe that are side chains, layer 2, layer 3. I don't know what it's going to look like, but I do know that inevitably there will become an engineering breakthrough and someone will be able to figure it out, because there's already, you can see, for instance, and I'm not necessarily a supporter of these two, because I have yet, the jury is still out for me on things like Stacks and Sovereign, but there's incredible amounts of work being done to bring smart contracts, bring NFTs, bring all of the things that everybody wants in the crypto space to the Bitcoin protocol. And I thought it was interesting what Stacks is doing. I don't like the idea of creating an alternative asset, which is why I think a lot of people do get turned off by Stacks, because it does have its own cryptocurrency. That isn't, for most people, that's immediate, like, no, it's a zero, right? I thought Manib had some great things to say that they were definitely good answers. I do need to do some more work, but you already see some Bitcoiners are supporting what he's doing, and they do think that that is the future of smart contracts on Bitcoin itself. So I just think that if people are patient enough and they're able to wait, this is a totally new industry. Like, this is the internet being rebuilt all over again. And it's happening faster than it did with the internet, but we still need to have a level of patience that it's going to take time for these things to be built. And if people can be patient, which I know is like impossible in this modern era where it's like, give me more input, give me more input. I'm like constantly thinking, I'm like, man, should I just cut my show down to 5 minutes? People just want that fast, instant gratification these days. So I think that if we can learn to be a little patient with this technology, that people will be in 10 years surprised by how much of it really is built on top of Bitcoin.
Yeah, look, I think that the potential for everything that's happening in the DeFi space with Ethereum and Solana and Polygon and everything else is potentially available on Bitcoin, right? I think that's possible. I think Lightning is powerful. I think there's a huge UX issue with Lightning that still has to be solved. I'd love to see Bitcoiners and every developer in crypto focus more on UX and UI. I think we make assumptions that everyone knows everything that's going on and that's coming in, and I think we miss out. And I'd like everybody in the space to get a little better about bringing in newbies and welcoming them. They all need to learn, but
I will say, as far as like the newcomers and maybe what some people would describe as toxic maximalism, if you come into a Bitcoin room, a Spaces or a Clubhouse, at least the ones that I'm in, I can't speak for all of the people out there, right? But generally speaking, if you come into a room with someone like me or someone else that I associate with, if you're new and you want to ask questions, I don't care if it's the dumbest question on the planet. Like, I'm going to sit there and I'm going to answer the question and try to help you along the path. If I can't answer it, I'm going to guide you somewhere else. But if you on the flip side of that, though, this is the thing, is myself and hundreds, thousands of other Bitcoiners out there spend countless amounts of their time and energy for free helping to educate people. So this is where I will say it does get frustrating, and sometimes does get an angry response when someone comes in with the intent to troll or to, of course, take advantage of that time.
And you should get angry. You absolutely should.
I think that when it comes down to the toxic maximalism, that it really comes down to an understanding of why it's there. Part of it is there to push back on people that have ill intent and to defend the community from scammers. I'm not saying everybody's a scammer, but there's a lot of people that would like to come in and scam, and it helps to keep people understanding, like, okay, our backs are back to back right now, and I know I can trust the other person behind me, that when I leave this room with all of these new people in here that are wanting to be educated, that they're not going to turn around and start scamming people. That's kind of one of the main reasons I think people miss when it comes to why we are so aggressively always trying to kick people out that aren't of good intent. The biggest part is really to defend new people. The biggest part is to make sure that scammers don't try to come in, because we want to create a community that is there for the right reasons. And that's a big part of why we do what we do. I think Tomer Strolight wrote a really good article. For those of you that haven't discovered him yet, he's an incredible writer, writes short articles, He does the instant gratification thing really well. They're all 5 to 10 minutes long. Some of them are even shorter for newcomers, but one of them is called Bitcoiners Aren't Toxic, They Have Integrity. And I think if you are worried about Bitcoin toxic maximalism, you think it needs to be rooted out and gone, I would highly encourage you to read that article, because I think that it's more of a problem with labels and not so much of a problem with the Bitcoin community itself. Although there are some people who do get a little out of control sometimes. We can't stop that. We're a decentralized community. Like, it's like an autoimmune response, right? Like, sometimes it overreacts, but is it good to take, a medicine to kill the autoimmune, reaction? I don't know. That's probably a dangerous tactic to take, unless you have a literal cancer, which I don't see that right now. Currently, I don't see ourselves as being filled with cancer. I think that we avoid cancerous problems because of the fact that the autoimmune is a little too strong at times even.
And I definitely can see and understand that rationale. I think from my perspective, the biggest problem I see is when that behavior is public and a group of people are rushing in from outside, right? Because whether the conversation is with that person and you, the newbie, it doesn't matter if you see it, and you see it like 2017 with Bitcoin, with Bcash, right? I mean, it was terrifying to people that were coming in from outside. It was like, what the hell? First of all, they're getting scammed by Bitcoin Cash calling itself Bitcoin, right? So you have all these people I knew that were buying it and didn't realize they weren't buying Bitcoin. And then there's this massive war going on where, people are threatening to kill each other. And it was just insanity. And so I think my biggest concern becomes when these wars impact adoption. To me, there is nothing more important than educating and getting people adopting, right? The more people I can get on it, like I used to do when my kids were in elementary school, I did career day every year at the elementary school. And I would do role playing with the children of bankers, businesses, the Federal Reserve, the whole bit, and would walk them through, and money was Smarties. And I knew I had them every time when I said I would tell the kid playing the Federal Reserve it was time to print more money. And their eyes would just look up in horror. And then I would start getting calls from the parents when they got home that their kids came home and told them they had to buy Bitcoin, like immediately, because the money was going to collapse. And I never told them the money was going to collapse, but I made them a little nervous.
You planted the seeds early there.
Exactly. And so my point being that we have so many people coming in that we want to jump in and become Bitcoin maximalists or crypto enthusiasts or whatever, that's the thing that scares me about it. What book do you recommend to newbies when they ask you a question?
So there's a few different books that I recommend depending on where they're coming from, depending on their level of education around the history of money, and depending on where they come from. Sometimes politically can be a difference as well. But
sure.
I got a comment really quickly about the idea of this adoption, which I think is important. I think adoption is important, but it's also important that people come for the right reasons. And although I don't like when you have someone lighting someone up in a public way and turning people away from Bitcoin, I think that the reason why Bitcoiners don't worry so much about adoption in the sense, because you don't hear a lot of Bitcoiners talking about adoption as far as it being like this very necessary thing, because we hold the belief that Bitcoin will win regardless of what we do because of its ability and its core principles of being sound money that can't be changed. And we know that sound money always wins because humans are always drawn to the most valuable money. There's a law that says good money chases out bad money. And this is the process. This is happening right now, right in front of us. So no matter what any of us do, as far as like trying to push adoption from an educational standpoint, which is important, and I help people do that on a regular basis, ultimately we see Bitcoin winning, not because of my individual desire to be a nice person, but because Bitcoin is just that valuable. And even if it takes people multiple times of running into a wall or running into a toxic maximalist who screamed at them, like eventually they're going to realize like, oh, this is it. So there's not like, the issue is also there's not a super strong incentive for us to be nice, right? Because then you're going to buy up all the Bitcoin and I'm going to have to pay more for it, right? So like that's the thing. That's the way we see the world. Like we already won. This game is already done. It's already been played out 1,000 times through history. We already know where we're going. I don't think that means we sit on our hands and do nothing. But at the same time, that's why a lot of us don't highly concern ourselves with ensuring that we're super nice to people every single time. Some people hold the belief that being nice could actually be detrimental, because if you're overly nice to someone, they will be into Bitcoin for the wrong reasons, which is that you were nice to them. So if, let's say, you are nice to them, and then you're growing this following of being nice and helping people get involved, and let's say you change your mind and now you're a Ethereum guy, well, they're going to want to follow you because you were the nice guy, right? So
Sure.
so some people hold that belief. I don't know. I have the jury's out on me on that one, but I try to be welcoming and helpful to people any chance I can. And if someone wants to scam or be a problem, be a troll, I just try to cut them off, move on to the next person. It's not necessary to scream at them in the middle of a public room and cause a disturbance for people that are there to learn.
I think you made a really valid point there. I don't think I'm somebody who's very much enthusiastic about adoption, right? So for me, it's a critical point. And for me, a mass of adoption helps solve our political problems. So for me also, I would rather bring in a mass of humans to us, so that vision of Bitcoin unstoppability actually doesn't end up being 1,000 guys in their basement trading Bitcoin back and forth. So my goal is to have so many people engaged with what we're doing that flow happens, right? Every one of us knows approximately 200, 250 people. That's what they prepare for at your funeral. And so that's an opportunity for every one of us to spread it out and to educate people properly, right? To help people understand how Bitcoin functions, what it does, and why it's important to them. But I also am not picky about people coming in as a trader first, right? So
Sure.
because I think as they trade, they get exposed to people like you and other people in the community that are talking about what's important about this. And so I'm okay with that as well. But I definitely understand that point of view. I've taken up a ton of your time, man, so I don't want to monopolize you. And I know you have other things to take care of in your life. You were going to talk a little bit about the books. Did you have specific book titles you wanted to talk about?
Yeah. So, I mean, I always tell someone to read the Bitcoin Standard.
Sure.
That's critical to me. If you like, the top three for me, just like really wanting to understand this stuff, some of them are a little more difficult to read, but if you're on like more of a medium to advanced path, you've been in the space, you understand how this technology works, then I'm a big believer in the Bitcoin Standard, Layered Money by Nick Bhatia, and also The Price of Tomorrow by Jeff Booth, who just appeared on Andrew Yang's show. So those are three really good show. There's one that I recommend to some people that are just getting started as well. Like, well, if you're religious, if you're a Christian, Thank God for Bitcoin is an incredible book to read.
I didn't even know that existed.
It'll Dispel by Jimmy Song, and actually a bunch of people wrote it. Robert Breedlove, Jimmy Song, J.M. Bush, and I'm forgetting some of the other names, so that's horrible of me. But there's like 6 or 7 people that wrote it together. And then there's also the Little Bitcoin book. That's a really good one that my friend Bradley Rettler recommends a lot. Okay. That he says it's really good for people that might be liberal or on the left. And what else do we got? I got a whole bunch of them, but that's got to be the best ones by far. So. There's an unlimited amount of Bitcoin books though. So.
Well, and I think we have a real problem first in educating the public on how money actually functions today. I think so many people are so clueless about it because we don't teach children how money works, right? And certainly the banks don't want us to know how it works. So I think that's I like the book Debt, the First 5,000 Years, which I think does an exceptional job of kind of painting the picture, although it's a bit long. So those are great. Thank you very much for that. Are there people besides Satoshi, are there people that you think or projects within the space that you think are absolutely critical or that you really admire for everything they're doing to drive things forward? Like, give me a list of 3. I know there's a lot, but people people should listen to.
Okay, so there's sounds like a little two questions there. One is projects that I think people should pay attention to, which is what's going on with the Lightning Network. I think a ton of different people are working on that and are building on top of it. And there's Lightning Labs. Elizabeth Stark does some incredible work building on top of Bitcoin and Lightning. You have Jack Mallers, who is building the Strike app, which is the organization, the group of people that helped get Bitcoin adopted in El Salvador. And you should pay attention to what's going on down there with Bitcoin Beach. Mike Peterson, friend of my family. I wish I could be. I'm going to be better friends with him here soon too. I think I'm going to go visit soon and educate people on the importance of Bitcoin as a technology, because ultimately it's a savings technology, right? So that's one big one. I really like, if you're a DeFi person, you want to look into kind of what's going on in Bitcoin. There is this app called Atomic Finance that's being developed. That's a good project to look into.
Okay, cool.
Tony Kai and Matthew Black working on that. There's DLCs being developed that some people think will help solve some of the DeFi problems for Bitcoin. You've got Nadav and Ben the Carman over at SuredBits working on that project. So there's a lot of great stuff out there. As far as speakers are concerned, people that are speaking about Bitcoin, people that are speaking in the space that are good to listen to on a regular basis.
It doesn't even have to be speaking. It could be people you think are just thought leaders, are important from that perspective.
I think that's kind of one of the things that's the ethos of Bitcoin, that we try to stay away from influential leaders. You can see that is very common. We have times where some people rise up and I think awaken a new understanding of Bitcoin. And a lot of the people in the space that speak about it in nonstop, that I think is their goal. Like we don't necessarily want to be the thought leader. We don't necessarily want to be the influencer. We want to be able to discover the next layer down the rabbit hole and share it with people. So whoever that is next, in the past, I think Michael Saylor did a great job of being someone who kind of awoken the ability for large corporations to understand this thing from a different angle. I've had a lot of friends that got orange pilled by him. And so he was a big one. There's been times where Robert Breedlove has done a good job of helping to share a better, deeper understanding of Bitcoin. There's another guy I like recently, Mike Alfred, where he has this Wall Street perspective, but he also has a deep understanding of the technology. He's been helping people understand Bitcoin from a different perspective. I like to find people like Jeff Booth, who they almost like don't exclusively talk about Bitcoin. They talk about a specific problem and then they link it to how Bitcoin will fix that. So he's a good one as well. If you haven't read his book, he talks a lot about deflation and how we will live in a world of deflation and why we shouldn't be afraid of it. But also we need to be having the conversation about how we get there without blowing this whole system up that we currently live in. So tons of great speakers.
Awesome.
I'm happy if anyone ever has a question specifically about Bitcoin or something that they need to learn more about. My DMs are always open. I try to respond to any person asking me questions if they have something interesting to add or just want to say hi. I have my Twitter at Dennis, so Dennis_Porter_, right? The other guy was taken. I try to hit him up, but it's long gone. I write sometimes. I have my Substack and I have my podcasts, and I try to also be someone that does help us increase our understanding of Bitcoin so that everybody else can understand it.
And to get to the podcast, Buzzsprout.
You could go right to YouTube, Smart People Shit. But also if you go to smartpeopleshit.com, you can find all the links to all the different podcast platforms. I'm on Spotify, Apple, everything. YouTube link is on the top right-hand corner of that website as well.
Well, I don't want to take up any more time. I've gone way over what we allocated. I do want to talk to you about El Salvador someday, so let's do that at some point. But I can't tell you how much I appreciate, number one, your time coming on to talk about kind of your point of view, but more importantly, what you are doing on behalf of all of us. And I think, everyone needs to understand that people in Bitcoin, people in Ethereum, whomever is out driving this and trying to lead us to a better way of treating this industry in this country. It's appreciated by all of us. We really do. Everyone appreciates it. And I'm excited to see what you're doing. And I am happy to help out. Anytime you send out the DM or the Telegram message, I'll be there to help out. So don't hesitate to ask.
Definitely. And there's that political Telegram group where we post all of the political stuff that's going on. We can share that in the links.
Put that in the show notes. Yep.
And then, if I just can't wait to get Erica Rhodes in office and get this dirty Shermy out of there. And we'll have a pro Bitcoin candidate that's there to fight for all of us.
Absolutely, man. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks for doing this. And I look forward to chatting more down the line here.
Of course. See you, Brad. Appreciate you having me on the show.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye-bye. Wow, that was a lot of fun. I got to tell you, I love seeing what Dennis is doing, the sacrifice he's making, and all of the other folks in the Bitcoin world and in the crypto world in general to take the fight to the politicians and not sit back and negotiate. It is time for us to fight and change the way this system functions and protect all of us. And that's what folks like Dennis are doing. It was a great discussion. I love being able to talk to people with differing points of view on a lot of issues, but on one thing, we are completely in agreement. We must take the fight to the politicians and to the regulators if we're going to win this war. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed what you hear, please subscribe, rate, tell your friends. We love you. We're all fighting for financial freedom together. Thank you.